In this video, I'm going to replace the rear brake fluid on a 2009 Kawasaki KLR 650. The reason I'm going to replace the brake fluid is because brake fluid absorbs water. It can absorb up to 2% of its volume in water every year, and this lowers the boiling point of the brake fluid, and it can also corrode your brake system components. So both those things can cause brake system failure under the right conditions. So replacing the brake fluid should be part of your motorcycle maintenance. Generally it's about every 2 years you should do this, but always check with your motorcycle manufacturer to see when they recommend replacing the brake fluid. The parts of the rear brake system are you got your brake pedal here. It's connected to your master cylinder here. You have a low pressure brake line here going to your brake fluid reservoir. Then you got a high pressure line here that runs from your master cylinder back to your rear caliper here, and then right here is your a bleeder valve on the rear caliper. There's a couple of things you should do before you begin the process of replacing the brake fluid. One is cleanliness. Make sure that you're not getting dirt into the brake system. Clean around your reservoir, and you can also clean around your bleeder valve on your rear brake caliper if that's dirty. Second thing you should do is brake fluid is a solvent, so it can take off paint off of metal and also plastics. So when I get this cover off, I'm going to put a towel, wrap this reservoir in a towel, so try and catch any drips that might come out of the reservoir. And also, if I see a drip or you see a run, clean it up right away, because you don't want this stuff getting on your paint. First thing you want to do is remove this rear brake fluid reservoir cover so you can get at the reservoir. It's just held on by 2 Phillips screws. And then there's a metal piece that covers the back side of this reservoir. I think it protects it from heat from the exhaust, so you want to remove that. To clean off around this reservoir, just take a clean rag, clean off the dirt around the reservoir. If you have compressed air works good to blow away any loose dirt that's in this work area. Then I want to protect the painted surfaces like my frame, so I'm going to take a rag and kind of wrap it around the bottom of this reservoir just to catch anything that might drip out. We want to get the old brake fluid out of the brake system, and I need to remove this. To do that, I need to remove the reservoir cap. There's also a diaphragm in the reservoir under the cap you want to remove. We want to loosen up this bleeder valve, but before we do that, I want to run a hose from the bleeder valve to a container to catch the old brake fluid. And then once I loosen up the bleeder valve, I'm going to pump the brake pedal here. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. And then it's going to pump all this old brake fluid out through the hose and into the brake fluid container. So I'll do that now. Don't worry about getting it all out, because anything that's left over, it will come out when we vacuum the new brake fluid through the system. With the old brake fluid out of the brake system, we need to add new brake fluid to the reservoir. Then we need to somehow bleed that new brake fluid through the system so that there's no air in your brake system. There's a couple of ways of doing that. One is a manual method. which I'm not going to use because it's more difficult. And the other method is using a vacuum pump to suck the brake fluid through the system, and that's the method I'm going to use. But just to give you an idea of the other method, you would fill the reservoir up to the upper limit. Then you would come over and press your brake lever down all the way. And while you're holding this down, you would come back here to your caliper, your brake bleeder valve. You would open it up. Air or brake fluid or both would come out. Then you would retighten it. And after you retighten it, you would release this brake lever. And then you would repeat that process about 20 or 30 times until all the air is out of your rear brake system. This is a Mightyvac MV8500 vacuum pump. It's also a pressure pump, but I've got it set to operate as a vacuum pump. I'm going to use this to pull the new brake fluid through the brake system and remove any air. What I'm going to do, this is connected to a hose that's connected to a reservoir to catch any brake fluid. And the reservoir is also connected to a hose that goes up to my bleeder valve on my rear brake caliper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pump this up to about 10 on this dial, which is 10 inches of mercury. And then I'll open up this valve and pull the new brake fluid through the brake system. So to begin this process, I'm going to add new brake fluid to the brake fluid reservoir. Fill it up to the full mark, and going to pump up the vacuum pump to 10 inches of mercury. Whoops, I let it out. Hope you can see that. It's about 10. Then I'm going to open up my bleeder valve and remove all the air and get the new brake fluid. And I got to keep an eye on the level of my brake fluid in the reservoir while I'm doing this. And I also have to keep a vacuum going at all times. So when I start to, I'm going to keep an eye on this, the brake fluid coming out of this rear caliper through the bleeder valve. When I stop seeing, when this brake fluid gets real clear and I stop seeing air bubbles, I'll know that it's bled out all the air. So you got to keep an eye on that too. Never let your brake fluid reservoir empty out, or otherwise you're going to introduce air into the system and you'll have to start over. When you add new brake fluid to your bike, always add it from a sealed container, because brake fluid absorbs water. So if you got an old container that's been sitting on a shelf for a year, that brake fluid probably has water in it. Once you get clear brake fluid flowing through this hose that's connected to the bleeder valve, and you no longer see air bubbles flowing through the hose, you can tighten up the bleeder valve. One thing you should be aware of when you're bleeding the brakes is when this bleeder valve is loose, air can get past the threads on this bleeder valve where it threads into the caliper and show up as little bubbles in the hose here. So something to be aware of when you're bleeding the brakes. But the real test to see if you're done bleeding the brakes is to check the brake pedal and make sure that it's firm when you press down. It shouldn't be mushy. If it's mushy, then you still got air in the system. With the bleeder valve closed and the brakes bled, we can remove this hose. It's better if you leave a vacuum in your on your vacuum pump through this system here. So when you pull this hose off of your bleeder valve, less fluid will drop out. And you can see how it just got sucked in. And then just clean up and Make sure there's no brake fluid on your caliper. You can close that. Then come over to your reservoir, fill it to the full mark. And we're ready to cap that off. With our reservoir full, we need to put our cap back on and our diaphragm. Sometimes when brake pads wear, your brake fluid level will drop and it will suck this diaphragm and pull it out. So just make sure when you reinstall it that it's collapsed. Put the diaphragm on. On this bike, there's another piece that goes on top of the diaphragm, and then you can put your cap back on. And just make sure there's no brake fluid spills. Wipe everything up. And you can reinstall your this protective backing piece. And then reinstall the brake fluid reservoir cover. And then you're good to go. Just take the bike out, test the brakes, make sure they're functioning properly. Take it easy at first, and everything checks out. You're good to go. Just to throw this in here, here's an example of what brake fluid can do to paint. I spilled some brake fluid here earlier, and I didn't clean it up, and you can see how it's discolored now. So yeah, that's why you should never get brake fluid on painted surfaces. Anyway, hope you found this video helpful, and thank you for watching.